Okay, Karen, over to yourself for housekeeping.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening all. My name is Karen Bowen. I'm the Democratic Services Officer supporting this evening's meeting. This meeting is being live streamed and it will be recorded for archive purposes, but is currently being live streamed, so anybody wishing to view can view it online. If there are any issues during the meeting, could the members and officers please contact me as soon as possible, and we can try and resolve any issues, but hopefully there won't be. Everybody's come online. I'm the only one in the chamber today. This is a remote meeting and we're only using the chamber to access the system tonight. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Councillor Susan Lloyd-Selby, who's going to be chairing the meeting tonight as the chair has sent apologies. Thank you, Councillor Lloyd-Selby.
Thank you, Karen. So can I welcome all committee and non-committee elected members, representatives from the voluntary sector, our officers, members of the public, and also to anyone who's watching the live meeting broadcast. I'm moving straight on to the agenda and beginning with agenda item 1 and apologies for absence. Thank you, Karen. We've already heard that the chair, Councillor Rhiannon Birch, has sent apologies. Do we have any others, please?
Yes, Chair, I've been informed that Councillor Ian Buckley is also unable to attend this evening, so sends his apologies.
Thank you, Karen. And on to the minutes of the previous meeting from the 29th of January. Are committee members happy with those minutes? Councillor Norman? Yes, so I move the minutes, and are you seconding them, Councillor Norman? I'm going to assume that that's what you were doing when you raised your hand, Councillor Norman. And again, if you want to come in and confirm that, that's fine. But otherwise, I'll take your raised hand as confirmation that there are no issues. And we move on to declarations of interest. Are there any, please? No, I see no hands. So moving swiftly on to agenda item 4. This is a presentation from Compass. And can I invite Tom Bowering, who's the Council's Director of Corporate Resources, to introduce this item, and colleagues from Compass, please. Thank you, Tom.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, committee. Thank you very much indeed for having us this evening. I'm just going to do a really quick introduction before handing over to my colleague Sarah from Compass. At our last meeting, we talked about the Council's future transformational change programme reshaping, and there's a theme there around strengthening communities, and there was some really good discussion about how we can go about redefining our relationship with different sectors and taking our services forward in the future. And I'm really pleased that Sarah's with us this evening in order to give us an update on the work that Compass have been doing with the Council and with our partners over the last few months, and to get committee's views this evening. So I'll hand over to you, Sarah, if I can.
Welcome, Sarah. You're very welcome to tonight's committee meeting. Are you running the... here we go. We've got the presentation. I can see that on the screen. Thank you.
Sarah, just to mention, we're not hearing your audio at the moment. Could you press your large activation button in the centre of your screen, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Sarah, yes.
Goodness, this is the first time, obviously, rookie errors here with the first time I've used this software. So thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Tom, for the introduction. I'm going to give you an overview of the work that I've been doing with the Council, and then we'll move on to a bit more discussion, I think, about the role of working with the third sector in the future, and be really glad to get some of your views. I know some of you, I can see on the screen that I've already had conversations with some internal staff at the Vale, but also some of the councillors that I can see are here as well. Right, if we could move on to the next slide, please. I wanted to give a little bit of an introduction to start with to Compass. I wasn't sure how much you'd know about us. Until a couple of years ago, we were called the Wales Cooperative Centre. We work all across Wales, and our aim is working to build a fairer, greener and more equal society and economy. So we do a lot of work around shaping local economies and do a lot of work with public sector bodies across Wales. Next slide, please. I just wanted on this slide to give you a little bit of an overview of some of the different projects, so you can just get, I guess, the breadth of activity that we actually do. So we deliver Social Business Wales. That used to be an EU-funded project, but a year ago that was taken over by Welsh Government. So that's part of the Business Wales family, but it is for any new start or any social enterprise that's looking to grow. So that's free support that's available to anyone across Wales. We also do a lot of work around digital, and I'm including digital inclusion in that. So we deliver Digital Communities Wales, again, a large national programme funded by Welsh Government. We do a variety of different consultancy services, so that might be work like we're doing here, but we also do work around facilitation and evaluation. For some of the third sector members on the screen, we also run a project called Newid, which is about supporting the third sector to embrace digital. So again, that's free support on offer. So if anybody's interested following this meeting, please contact me. We do lots of work around community-led housing, community shares. We're working with a number of local authorities to deliver social economy projects as part of the Shared Prosperity Fund. And we do a lot of work around social care as well. So we do various test and learn projects across Wales, again really working closely with public sector bodies and third sector organisations as well. So if we move on to the next slide, I can tell you a little bit more about the work that we've been doing with the Vale of Glamorgan. So the work is centred on 3 or 4 Audit Wales reports that were published around sort of 18 months, 2 years ago. So that has involved looking at community resilience, looking at poverty and the different strands of work that the local authority is doing, but also really focusing on how is the council working with the social enterprise sector and the third sector that you've got. So we've done lots of internal engagement, and I'm sure I can see Farida's on the screen. So Farida, I'm sure you don't mind me saying you're one of the teams that we've engaged with and looked at some of the really fabulous work that you're doing. We've done also a variety of different workshops. So we did a social enterprise workshop for the council, and Tom, I think you'll agree that we had a really productive sort of morning session there, didn't we, about real opportunities in terms of moving forward. But a lot of the work is involved in engaging externally. So we've done work with third sector organisations, social enterprises, done work with some of you around the screen with the town and community councils. Last week we also ran a Section 16 workshop. So that's Section 16 of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, and I'll tell you a little bit about that later on in the presentation. And then also coming and gaining the views of yourselves tonight in terms of this liaison committee and what might the future of this look like. So if we could have the next slide. So these are the 2 reports. I don't know if anybody's seen these, but these are the 2 I really wanted to focus on tonight. So the first one is a review that was done specifically in the Vale of Glamorgan about how the local authority is working with the third sector in the county, and that was done in 2021. A more recent one, published in December 22, is Social Enterprise and Missed Opportunity, that was published, and that's a national report that was undertaken by Audit Wales. So if we move on to the next slide, we'll look at some of the findings of these reports. So if we start with the social enterprise report that was research was undertaken on a national basis, and Audit Wales did do a lot of research with each of the 22 local authorities in Wales on this subject area. And their overall conclusion was that local authorities are not working effectively with the social enterprise sector. They could be working more to maximise the impact, use that resources better, but also improve the services that we're offering to our communities. They also really noted that a lot of local authorities were very passive in their approach to how they were leading that social enterprise sector and the work that was being done. And I don't know how familiar everybody is with the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, but under Section 16, there is a responsibility that local authorities will work with social enterprises as part of their duties to offer a variety of services across their communities. So if we just look at the next slide, it will focus a bit more specifically on Section 16. It found actually that few local authority officers actually knew about those duties that were there to promote the sector, to promote the social enterprise sector, working in social enterprise. Then they also, a number of the authorities found that they were good at working with those existing players that they knew, but not really good at reaching out and seeing who else was there or even helping to create new ones. And authorities were really investing that time and effort in refreshing policies and procurement procedures to build capacities. But that was very much to those existing social enterprises again, rather than new ones. And I think, I think that's a good debate that we can maybe have about some of the steps that the council might be able to take. So if we move on to the next slide, we can have a look at some of the findings that came out of the report that was specifically for the Vale of Glamorgan about the third sector. This report was written, I guess, just as we were coming out of COVID. And so, it's a few years old now, but it'd be interesting again to see if we think things have changed. So they found that the council's arrangements for working with the third sector were fine, but as the council sees, it's got recovery priorities here. But I think, Tom, we could talk about those transformational priorities that are coming through. Things need to change and culture needs to change. So they specifically said they'd come to those conclusions because of the way that the council is currently working with the third sector, how the pandemic really highlighted the role that the third sector could be playing, but also that the council is very keen to work more collaboratively with third sector organisations, but recognising that's not going to happen overnight. That needs changes to approach to funding, approach to oversight. Again, that's useful to think what this committee thinks about that, but also that shifting culture maybe for the third sector, but also for the local authority. So if we move on to the next slide. So these are some of the views that I managed to glean through my interviews with third sector organisations in the last couple of months within the Vale of Glamorgan. What really came through to me was the strong working relationship that organisations have, but very much with individual members of staff rather than wider teams within the local authority. Overall, I think that the third sector were really complimentary about the work the council are doing, particularly, the work that Tom and his team are doing. They very much felt that staff in the Vale listen and staff respond. And, for me, that's really good to hear because I work with a lot of local authorities and a lot of the people who we spoke to as part of these interviews work across a variety of different counties across Wales. And they feel that there is a really positive, proactive team within the Vale across the variety of different departments, which I think is really good as we're talking about what next. They felt that the third sector were viewed as a partner, but there's always a but, isn't there? They'd really like to get more involved before decisions are made, and very much about those funding decisions that the local authority is making. What also came out was about paying certain funding, core funding, grants, making sure that that's done as timely as possible. But you have an ambitious sector in the Vale, and that they really want to look at how they can be providing commissioned services, and they really want an opportunity to work with you to shape and co-produce those services too. So on the next slide, I'm going to talk about the workshop that we held last week. So this was an in-person workshop that we did in Barry. We had great attendance. We had about 20 different third sector organisations represented there. And we also managed to bring in a couple of really good co-produced new types of solutions. So Gaynor Jones spoke about the Your Choice model that you've got now for domiciliary care, but we also managed to get Llamau to come and speak about the new residential children's facility that's opening, that again they've co-produced with the local authority. And I'm doing a lot of work about the eliminating profit in children's residential care, and this has been a really great example of seeing a local authority and a third sector organisation moving into a new offer, a new service offer. So what really came out of that workshop as well was that the third sector really want to innovate and develop new solutions. They want to see how they can get those ideas to you. And I think it's making sure that those conduits are in place to get those ideas and start looking at how those ideas can be shaped up as we look at how could they deliver sustainable solutions. As part of Section 16, there is an obligation now to have a Section 16 forum within the county and on a regional basis. What I think for me came through was looking at the programme that social care are planning. I think there's an opportunity to have something a bit more dynamic and engaging work programme to really keep the third sector on board and interested in attending those forums. Procurement attended last week. I think we need to make sure as we move to a new procurement regime that we see procurement as an enabler rather than the barrier that we always see it as. So I think there's opportunities there as the new regs come in, the new social partnerships bill comes in, the new work around how to procure and impact that needs to be recorded. I think there's a real opportunity there to let the third sector shine. And I think they need that support as well in terms of third sector organisations. Sometimes we're never very good at talking about the work that we're doing and monitoring the impact that we're actually having. And how can we really highlight that social value and that well-being impact that we're generating? So those are some reflections that came out of that for me. So moving on then for some questions for yourselves, really. Your thoughts on what I've found to date, does that ring true to you? Do you feel there's something that I'm missing? Also, the role of this committee, that third sector report that was done by Audit Wales that focused on the Vale, talked about the role of this committee as being quite a high level committee, that maybe only certain people are invited to. Is that how the committee should continue? Should it widen its offer? How could it look different in the future? But also, the compact with the third sector with GVS expired in 2021. So what does the next iteration of that look like? And how could it look different in terms of what it's trying to achieve? I don't know, Karen, Amy, if you want to stop sharing and maybe we can just ask everyone what they think about those findings. Tom, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add, or Chair, if there's anything you'd like to add your thoughts to what I've presented.
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you, Sarah. That was really helpful taking us through that presentation. And just to echo what Sarah said, Tom, is there anything you want to come in on before I open it up to committee members?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much, Sarah, for taking us through it. And I think actually you captured in 10 minutes a huge amount of work that's been underway. So thank you for that. It's great to hear the relationships are valued by third sector colleagues, because we do take those really seriously. And I suppose I'm really interested from committee this evening to see if that resonates with colleagues on the committee, and that question that you posed in terms of how members see this committee operating in the future, and how they, as elected members and representatives from the third sector, best feel that they can get involved in some of the work that we're doing, with a particular eye, as you mentioned, on those transformation theme priorities and objectives that we set ourselves. So yeah, thanks very much.
Should we hand it over to the floor then? Is there anyone else that would like to come in? Chair, sorry, I'm taking your role now, aren't I?
No, that's fine. Yeah, so thank you, Tom, for those additional comments. Anyone would like to come in and ask any questions or comment on that? I'm looking for hands.
Maybe if we repose the question, Chair, in terms of, the role of this committee, maybe who's invited, the subjects that you're discussing. Is there anything that you would like, that the members would like to see being done differently?
So one of my questions before we get to that, if I may, Sarah, is what were the next steps that was agreed following the Section 16 workshop that was held earlier on in this month? And I'd be really interested in your perception and Tom's perception actually on what's holding us back, because in this committee in previous meetings, we're very conscious that there's a lot of pressure on the council at the moment, but that pressure is equally reflected within community organisations and the third sector. So, one of my thoughts has been what appetite is there out there to step into a new way of working? And from what you're saying, there is an appetite and there's a lot of enthusiasm and there's a desire to engage, which is really welcome. So what's been holding us back so far? And were there any specific steps agreed following the workshop earlier this month?
Yeah, I think bearing in mind the workshop was only last Tuesday, my thoughts were reflected there. I think the programme that Ian McMillan and the team have come up with around the Section 16 forums and what they'll look like are based on the procurement needs and the procurement opportunities that are going to be coming out. However, to me, it's far broader than those procurement needs. I think you have a sector now that really wants to engage with you, and you need to create and shape those opportunities. And for me, that's why I put that question around, is there a potential to come together to have those more innovative solutions? And we will have, in the room the other day, we had what could be seen as competitors, but actually they don't need to be competitors, because if they work together, that service would look different. And I think that's where we really need to be putting effort, and especially into that, not endpoint services of crisis, in those preventative services that we know the third sector are excellent at delivering. So I think there's something, over the next few weeks, Tom and Helen and I are going to be shaping up some of these findings. What are those next steps to inform your next corporate priorities? But for me, there's something about, it's flagged up in that social enterprise report. You can't be passive. You've got to go on and lead. And I think there's that. I think the time is ripe to do that leading. Sorry, Tom. I don't know. Do you want to come back in on that?
I was going to ask you, Tom, if you want to come back on that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I think outside of the social care arena, one of the things that I took away from our session, Sarah, was maybe a lack of awareness amongst colleagues of social enterprise and the potential role. So I think there was something really powerful in the session we ran with colleagues that actually drew their attention and understanding and awareness of the role that social enterprise could play. And there's something, I think, Chair, in terms of our relationships with the voluntary sector and the fact that colleagues in that sector say that we're good to work with, that we've got a good foundation now to take this work forward. And your question in terms of kind of what's held us back in the past, I think certainly over the last few weeks and reflecting on a session we had with the Chief Exec and directors on Friday, looking at our reshaping priorities now for the next sort of 12, 24 months, I think there's some really good ideas coming through, and there's the governance and delivery arrangements now in place to make that happen. And importantly, I guess there's the impetus as well, because there's a recognition that given the state of public finance, local authorities are not going to do everything that we've always done in the same way as we've always done it. And there's actually a real opportunity, I think, in what Sarah's been presenting back to committee this evening, that says, well, actually, there is an opportunity now for us to work with different sectors in terms of delivery of services that people might be better placed to do in the community and in those sectors rather than ourselves. And there is genuinely that desire, I think, now to explore those things in more detail than we have done previously. So it's the timing of this work is choreographed to allow us to build on that. And in terms of next steps, as Sarah was saying, absolutely, I want to make sure that we've got that Section 16 work properly rooted within the organisations that we're supporting our colleagues in social care, making sure then that we've got that awareness building across the rest of the organisation. We'll hear from colleagues in housing later on, and there's a role around how they can be supporting some of those priorities. And then that wider sector, voluntary and third sector role in terms of supporting services that sometimes can maybe be non-statutory, they might be preventative, they're really important future-focused services that we know we need to invest in, but we need to do it in a different way than we have done in the past.
Helen, I can see you've got your hand up. Did you want to come in?
Thank you. Yes, I think it was just to sort of add from the workshops that we had that what came through really strongly was the need for officers within the council to have a better understanding of some of the needs within the sector and sort of what some of their challenges might be. But also what came through very strongly in the workshop last week on the Section 16 one was about us understanding explaining a bit more about our processes and our requirements. And Ian was really clear in terms of some of the challenges around social services, but actually some of the things that can assist people in terms of putting forward their tenders and the process. And I think it was really welcomed by the people attending the workshop to have that better insight in terms of what success can look like. There's quite a bit of focus about where service users are involved in those panels and making the decisions about what they're looking for as well, and the weighting around some of that. So it really came through very strong, and we were so pleased with the attendance, but actually that how worthwhile it was for giving that couple of hours on both sides to build those relationships as well. So it was really sort of positive, I think, from that. And as Tom was saying then about how we look at that in terms of that wider approach across the council. I think the other thing that came through, Ian's very much looking for a co-chair for that forum as well. So from the outset, trying to make it really clear that it's not just about what the council wants, but actually how it can be a very positive relationship. So some really good steps forward, I think. That's just sort of to add those.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. Karen, I could see you came on screen earlier. Was there something you wanted to raise?
Not to raise, Chair, from the point of view of the presentation from myself, but I can see Linda Newton has put something in the chat. And I just wondered, Linda, for the benefit of those viewing, would you mind coming on screen and explaining that? I think I can read, be great to have workshops around themes, and I think such as prevention. Would you like to come on screen and present your question? Are you unable to connect, Linda? Just if you press the big button in the middle of your screen. Sorry, I don't know if everyone else can see what Linda said in the chat, because unfortunately one of the screens is over it, but I can just see she's got, would be great to have workshops around themes such as prevention, things like that.
So can I suggest that we pick that up with you, Linda, outside the committee meeting, because it sounds like you've got some useful ideas there that would be helpful for us to consider. And certainly in terms of the compact, my understanding, my memory might be failing me, but my understanding is that we had a discussion about that some committee meetings ago, and I think there is some work being done around refreshing that, because obviously the previous compact is, as you say, is out of date. But I think when we looked at that as a committee, we very much recognised that there was a real opportunity here for us to refresh and reset the relationship between the council through that and partners through that compact. Tom, did you want to come in on that?
Certainly, Chair, and just to provide an update for yourself and members, that some really good work has been undertaken between Helen's team and colleagues at GVS. There is now an updated draft of that compact that we're just looking to finalise, and we'll be bringing it back to committee in due course. But it's been a really useful process to have that conversation with GVS in terms of what they would like to see the council committing to doing, and giving us an opportunity to have that conversation with GVS as well. So I think as one part of the work that Sarah has been talking to us this evening about, that kind of redefining of relationships with different bodies, and some really good progress on that in terms of our relationship with GVS.
Hello. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sarah, for your report. One of the things I was concerned about, you saying that people thought they were prohibited from sitting on this council or this committee or giving information to this committee. I noticed from our representative list, we have actually got 4 vacancies from the voluntary sector that are not being filled. Now, there's local people complaining they can't get onto the committee if nobody was going to stand forward to take up a post on this committee. And without the input from these committees, from these organisations, we as a committee cannot really move forward. We need their input. And it's no good sitting back saying nobody's going to do anything for us if they don't tell us what they want and how they want it done. So rather than sit back and say, what they're going to do for us, come to us and tell us what they want. Then we can coordinate everything and get something moving, not just sit there complaining. I'm sorry I got a bit of a rant about that. But
no, that's really good complaining. Councillor Norman, I think that, I think that refreshed interaction, Tom and Helen with the third sector, I think will, sort of let people know about these opportunities of being part of these committees. And as you say, have that voice at the table to start to shape what does that relationship look like moving forward. But yeah, good point.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Norman. Yes, and as you said, Sarah, I think there are clearly a number of opportunities for us to pause and reflect and think about not just the relationship with the third sector going forward, but also what the role of this committee is. So I note your comment earlier on in your presentation that the perception is this is quite a high level committee, and I'm conscious that colleagues in the third sector are very busy and they will want to put their time into something where they feel that's worthwhile and there's a real opportunity to influence and understand the wider agenda. And Councillor Norman is quite right. We very much welcome that engagement with colleagues from the third sector and hope that as we refresh our relationship with the third sector through the compact, through the Section 16 fora that are being developed, there's also an opportunity for us to strengthen and refocus the work of this committee. And I think all those of us who are members of it would very much welcome that and welcome the opportunity to have a further conversation about it. And I think there are probably things that we can do that will facilitate that. So, for example, we're going to circulate, with your permission, we're going to circulate the presentation that you've made tonight. And I think it would be useful, my recommendation would be that we use that as a bit of a stepping stone, an invitation, a broader invitation to the broader third sector to say we are listening and we are open to engaging with you, and we welcome the opportunity to have those conversations. Very, very early stage where the third sector are wanting to talk with us about issues or just talk through some issues and opportunities that they might be interested in exploring. Yeah. So I think we can very much use this as I say, as a bridge, as a stepping stone to strengthen that conversation that I know has already been happening. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Sarah, you're very welcome to stay for the rest of the committee meeting if you'd like to join us. But
I probably will watch the recording, but I think I will leave him. Thank you very much, Chair, for your time.
Thank you for your time.
Good evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. And equally, Tom, thank you for your support for that agenda item. And again, if you want to stay with us for the rest of the committee meeting, you're very welcome. And if you need to leave, of course, please do and enjoy the rest of your evening. So we move on to agenda item 5. Sorry, I should just add that I'd like to suggest a recommendation for committee, which is that we have an update on the work of the Section 16 groups as they're taken forward. And also, as Tom has updated us and said that there's already a draft of the voluntary sector compact that comes back to committee. I imagine that's already on the agenda, but if it isn't, can I recommend that to committee members as the next step following on that report? And thank you, Jane. I think you're seconding that. So thank you. Other than that, we will note that presentation. And we move on then to agenda item 5, which is our second presentation this evening from housing on the work that's being done with the third sector. We're joined by Nick Jones and colleagues from Public Housing Services who are going to take us through that presentation. But before we move on to that agenda item, I can see, Linda Newton, you've got your hand up. So did you want to come in at this stage? No, that's fine. Please just put your hand up again if you want to comment on anything at any time, Linda. But otherwise, as I say, we move on to the next agenda item. And I believe we've got a presentation from Nick. So over to you, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. Thanks, Liam, but I'm just going to sort of just do some introductions in a second to some colleagues, and I'll share the presentation then. But by way of an introduction for people who don't know me, I'm Nick Jones. I'm the operational manager for housing, and I'm joined this evening by two of the managers in my team, Hedwyn John, who oversees the supporting people team, and Farida Aslam, who's a senior neighbourhood manager who looks after housing management and community investment. Hedwyn and Farida are going to spend a bit of time sharing some details about how their services work with third sector organisations. But before handing you across to Hedwyn and Farida, I just want to make a couple of general points really for context right at the beginning. The first being about the breadth of services delivered by the housing team, from homelessness to the management of temporary accommodation, producing housing strategies, supporting people, resettlement support for refugees, rural housing, to landlord services, things like housing management, management of estates, tackling antisocial behaviour, rent collection, etc. A really broad range of services, and we're a relatively small team. So it just means that we can't do it all by ourselves. So the partnerships that we form with others, including the third sector, are vital in delivering this range of services. The second point really is about what we might refer to as our enabling function. It's probably about creating the right conditions for things to happen, not necessarily doing things ourselves within the council. So some examples of that might include the work that we do with private landlords to make sure homes are available to rent to homeless households. Another example is probably rural housing, where we can identify where homes are needed in rural areas and engage with local groups, community councils, etc., housing associations as well, to deliver new homes, albeit on a small scale, but about providing accommodation for people, in local areas, and also sustaining rural communities. And regarding our tenants, tenant empowerment is an important term. It refers to giving tenants and tenants groups the confidence, the skills, but also the support that they need to improve their own lives and also make council estates better places to live. That could include employability support for people with barriers to employment, or support for a group wanting to take over running of an open space or a green area within their estate so it better meets the needs for local people. Farida's probably going to talk about that in a little bit more detail, but this enabling and this empowerment role often relies on the involvement of the third sector. So I'm going to pass across to Hedwyn firstly, who will share with you how the supporting people team work with others to provide essential support to vulnerable people, housing-related support. And then Farida's going to follow on after, hopefully, and talk about specifically housing management and community investment. There's an opportunity to ask questions, obviously, at the end if people were wanting to do that. So this is where I test the technology, and hopefully I'll share the screen correctly in a second. Just need to choose the tab, and so I'm talking through it, but it should appear on the screen shortly. And I'll drive Heather, so I can sort of take through the slides if you're ready to speak.
Yeah, I'm ready to go, Nick. Thanks very much. Can everybody hear me okay?
We can hear you, but could you just put it into presentation mode, Nick, because it's a little bit small for us on screen.
Is that better?
Not yet, not on my screen.
If you click on off from the beginning on the top left of your screen, Nick, that should switch it.
Yeah,
Can you see it? Just below file.
I'll end it and so I've done that. It's showing as large on my screen, but
We're not quite there, but I think it's probably okay in terms of us.
sorry, Chair. I have got it on the presentation mode on my screen. I'll try once more and see if that.
Nick, could you try via the presentation button in the orange ribbon at the top as well?
Okay. Is that showing in presentation mode for anybody? I'm assuming not by the...
No, we're just normal view mode we're seeing.
If you go up to the very top, like Amy's mentioned on the orange line, you'll see there's a big screen sign by one of the arrows with the circle. See the very top?
So I've got the change screen window. Share.
If you go up to the very top on the orange, can you see the word autosave?
Hang on, let me just go into the screen. Sorry about this, everyone. So tell me again, Karen.
If you go up to the orange line at the very top, you see it says autosave, and you go across.
I haven't got an orange strip on on my screen.
Oh, it's coming up on our screen. It's right at the very top of your screen. You can't see it, can you?
On the present, no.
Yeah.
No, I can just.
Okay, not to worry. Do you want me to try and share it in the chamber?
Would that be okay, Karen?
Yeah, that's fine.
If it doesn't work, we'll revert to plan A.
We'll try it, or we'll go back to the smaller version. Okay, thank you.
Okay, shall I kick things off?
If you just hang on just 2 minutes, if that's okay, we'll just see if Karen's able to share it in a different format. Apologies to committee members. There we are. We're there. Fantastic.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Chair.
Please go
You're
ahead.
welcome.
Okie dokie. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Nick, for introducing me. As Nick said, my name is Heather and John. I'm the Supporting People Team Coordinator for the Vale. So the Supporting People team, we are responsible for administering the housing support grant, which some of you may have heard of, some of you may haven't. If we can skip forward 2 slides, please. Yep, another one. That's it. So what is housing related support? Well, the housing support grant is geared, it is designed by Welsh Government to fund housing related support. And housing related support is basically a flexible range of services that are designed and intended to help enable vulnerable people to live independently. So housing related support plays a key role in preventing homelessness, and it also helps reduce pressure on wider public services, for example, the health service, social services, and criminal justice. Like I said, it's a Welsh Government grant, and every local authority in Wales has responsibility for assessing the housing support needs in their area, to carry out strategic planning, and for commissioning services. So with the main intention being to help prevent homelessness. The support is there to help people live independently. The support is to help people live in their own home, or if they don't live in a home, if they live in a hostel or in sheltered housing, or if people are homeless living on the street, support to help get them into housing. Again, that's the prevention side of it. So who might be eligible for this support? Well, each local authority sets their own guidelines, really, as we do. But in the Vale, it's for people with a housing support need who are either homeless or at risk of homelessness, who are living here, or they could be placed by the Vale of One Council in accommodation outside the Vale. So it covers a wide range of people, but you don't need to be a tenant to access the support. You don't need to be a homeowner or a renter. You don't even need to have a home. It's a very broad broad eligibility. If we go on to the next slide, what does support look like? So, like I said, we've got a range of housing-related support services, and they're intended to help vulnerable people gain the skills needed to live independently in the community. So that doesn't just mean having a roof over your head or somewhere to live, but it's also feeling safe there, living happily and integrated into the community. So that, the support is around someone's tenancy. It can also be about moving homes, so into a new tenancy or out of an unsuitable property. As I touched upon earlier, if you don't have a tenancy, you could be living with your parents, you could be living on the streets, and the support there is to help you find accommodation. That could be independent living accommodation, or there could even be what we call supported accommodation, which I'll touch upon in a moment. So what does support actually look like? Well, it's a huge range of different things that support does, but I've listed a few here just to give you a broad overview. So initial support might be to settle into your home and to support how to maintain your property, understanding your rights and responsibility as a tenant and how to manage your tenancy. A lot of the support delivered will be around budgeting, finances, managing rent arrears, for example, is a key one to prevent homelessness, but can also be around applying for benefits, knowing what types of benefits that you're entitled to. And of course, things like managing money, maximizing your income. So that could be, for example, support around getting a cheaper tariff on your electricity or gas bill, maximizing income. As I touched upon, there's application of benefits there. There could also be around help with looking for work, filling in job applications, writing CVs, that sort of thing. There's also support around practical living skills. So we have a number of supported accommodation services that we commission for a range of people, which I'll go through in a moment. But many of those service users may not have run their own home before. They may be young people who've only moved out of the family home or come out of the care system. So support with living skills could be, for example, around cooking, how to clean, washing your clothes, just basic living skills there that, you might not think too much about. But, it's a key thing that we are taught through our lives and, it's second nature. But for many people, it's brand new and it's not something that they were accustomed to. So that's a key element, particularly in supported accommodation. Other support can be around things such as signposting to other agencies, for example, drug and alcohol services, getting a service user signed up to a GP. You'd be surprised how many people out there who don't have a GP or they're not signed up to a dentist. Quite a lot of people. Someone may need help filling in the forms, finding out where the local services are. Transport is an issue. So we don't offer a taxi service, but a support worker will look at what options are they're available. Help, understanding the bus timetable, the train timetable, managing your money so you can pay for a taxi if you need to. Applying for the right benefits. So, for example, PIP payments, for example, can be put towards things like paying for transport and that sort of thing. So it's a huge different range of different things there support work can help with. And as I said, support around work, training and volunteering. So looking for volunteering opportunities, work, training. Those are key routes out of, poverty. Those are key routes to getting financial independence. It's not just about filling in benefit forms. It is about looking at increasing someone's income through the world of work, and support workers, help do that. They aren't experts in that, and that's when they will refer to your local volunteering services, the job centre. They will, the local colleges, to get people on board with those services. Another key thing the support looks like will be advice on your housing issues, things like arrears and evictions. As you may be aware, we are going through a bit of a housing crisis at the moment. There's a shortage of affordable accommodation. Landlords are often leaving the market, and unfortunately, housing services are having to deal with lots of people being evicted or at risk of eviction, people who may have accrued arrears through no fault of their own, or maybe not through the best budgeting, or for whatever it may be. Or they may be in poor quality housing, there could be damp, there could be mold. What are your tenants' rights? What, how, who do you speak to and what steps do you take if you have an issue? If you're got a private landlord, for example, or even an RSL landlord, even the council, a support worker can help someone make a complaint, or, someone may not have the confidence to write a letter or not know where to go, and the support worker can help with that. And on a basic level, support is also around filling in forms, letters and bills, for example. You would be surprised how many people who have struggled to read and write, but also have the confidence or the anxiety if you are struggling financially or struggling with things around evictions. You may be too scared to open the mail, and you'd be surprised how many people do have anxiety around that and need support to manage their mail, and then to keep a filing system, or however we all do it, to make sure that we've all paid our council tax or bills and we don't miss anything important. And of course, the people who are already in current accommodation, that accommodation may not be suitable anymore. Like I said, it could be the mold, it could be damp, it could be all sorts of issues. It could just be that you can't quite manage the stairs anymore. You might want to move to a bungalow, or the rent may be too high and you want to go somewhere more affordable. Again, the support worker can help with that. They can help someone apply through the Homes for You application system, but also look for alternative private rental accommodation. It can be quite scary, or can be quite, daunting looking for accommodation. So having a second pair of eyes to support there, many people find that beneficial. We also fund what we call a family mediation service, and that is geared towards young people, really, between the ages of 16 to 24. Most of us may be familiar. More and more young people are staying longer with their parents in the family home. And that can lead to, breakdowns in relationship. There can be, arguments and disagreements. And, on occasion, the young person may be asked to leave. Well, the family mediation service gets involved, where it's safe to do so, when it's safe for, someone to go back home, and work with the family to see if they can come over those differences, and, to see if, where possible, if the young person can remain at home as long as possible. Because obviously that is preferable to someone being made homeless if obviously it is safe for them to return home. If it isn't safe, of course, then we would refer through to housing services to access homelessness accommodation where required, or potentially supported accommodation. If you can go on to the next slide, I'll just briefly touch upon some of the different types of support that people can receive. Well, floating support is what we call when someone will be assigned a support worker who will usually visit them in their home, but it could be in the hostel, it could be at an agreed neutral location, a cafe, the library, a cafe, the council offices, and that support worker will work with someone to develop a support plan around their housing needs. They will identify then what are the most important goals. Like I said, it could be getting rehoused, it could be managing debts or arrears, budgeting, it could be finding more suitable accommodation. Whatever the housing goal is that the service user wants, the support worker will develop that plan around that, and then put in place steps to work with the service user to achieve those goals. Now, that support is flexible and is person-centered. So back in the day, we used to have someone would be seen once a week, and it had to be for 4 hours, and it was very prescriptive, and it was set by very old rules that we had many, many years ago. And some people didn't need 4 hours of support a week. Some people might need more. Some people might need less, or they might not need support for a couple of weeks, and then they get a letter from council tax saying that they haven't paid, or that they get a letter saying their rent arrears by the landlord, and they might need help. So then they can phone their support worker, and the support worker can arrange to come and see them and deliver that support. It doesn't have to be face to face. Support can be over the phone or via email, or over what we call Skype or Teams these days, ever since COVID. But obviously, face to face support is beneficial for many, because you get, as a support worker, you get to see the housing conditions that someone is living in. Someone might be saying, "Oh, my housing is fine, I've got no issues," but actually getting to see the accommodation and the circumstances might reveal a situation that's very different. So we do try and encourage face-to-face where possible, but it's person-centred, so that is entirely up to the service user. On top of that, we have what we call temporary supported accommodation. That's typically accessed for up to 2 years, but that's not a hard limit. We are flexible around that. And that's temporary accommodation intended for move on. So it's not a permanent housing solution for someone. The idea there is that someone moves into the accommodation where they will have a support worker assigned to them, and they will do very similar things as floating support, but often the more additional things on top. So the daily living skills, for example, around cooking and cleaning, that's particularly important if you have someone in our younger person's service, a 16-year-old, for example, coming out of the care system, who may not be accustomed to doing all that. And we need to remember that the plan is to get someone independent into their own accommodation within 2 years out in the community. So the support there is geared as much as possible to be as realistic about what life will be like out in the community. Obviously, it's not always possible because it's, you are in a shared setting there, whereas out in the community, more likely you wouldn't be in that scenario. But obviously, it's a key support. It's essential, particularly for younger people. But we have specialist services. So we have criminal justice services for people who've come out of the prison system. We have mental health support accommodation as well for people who may have come out of a mental health institution, hospital, or people who actually may need, they may have had their own accommodation, but due to a mental health crisis, were unable to keep it. But they didn't quite meet the needs to go into hospital. So rather than putting them in, limbo, shall we say, temporary support accommodation can work very well to get someone, into a more adjusted position and learn the daily living skills and have that necessary support around their housing before going back into the community. So that's temporary supported. We also have what we call drop-in support. So that was basically geared because we found the waiting list for floating support was just very, very long. It could take people months before they got a support worker. And as you can imagine, if someone is in rent arrears or they have problems with paying their council tax or whatever the scenario is, you can't wait months for a support worker. The longer you wait, the worse the problem gets. So drop-in support, we initially set that up, basically during COVID, really, around about 4 years ago now. That time has flown by. But in a nutshell, we have a service where people can phone up or they can drop in. There's an office on Holton Road, the one-stop shop, and they can basically see a support worker or speak to a support worker almost straight away. It's geared around short-term support, what I call brief interventions, which is meant to be, short, sharp housing advice. Someone's got a letter, someone's got an eviction notice, someone's got something critical that needs help there and then, and it doesn't need longer term work. So that's where the support workers will go straight in and then look at the scenario and see how they can help that service user straight away, basically. And what they will do on top then is, if they identify there's a longer piece of work needed, for example, if someone does come in with £2,000 rent arrears, there might be a longer work required around budgeting or, claiming benefits and that sort of thing. And then they will refer back through then to us in supporting people to make sure that person gets longer term floating support assigned to them. And then, of course, we have mediations, which I touched upon a little bit earlier. So that's where trained family mediators work with young people to try and reconcile them with their family, to maintain that relationship and try and help them to stay in the family home when it is safe to do so. Obviously, that's not always safe to do so, but where possible, we do get some good results by keeping people in the home for longer. If you go on to the next slide. So I've just touched upon this briefly, but we do have a number of specialist services. So we have mental health, 24-hour supported accommodation. So Windsor Road and Home Street. That's a shared setting. No, I do apologise. Our 24-hour accommodation is East Quay. Our shared accommodation is Windsor Road and Home Street. So in the case of the 24-hour support accommodation, the 7 service users who live there again, it's for up to 2 years. They get their own flat, self-contained, and they have a support worker on site 24/7. In the shared supported accommodation, Home Street and Windsor Road, they have their own room, but they do have shared kitchen and bathrooms facilities. So it's not as ideal, and the staff aren't there 24/7. They're there Monday through Saturday. And that's why we came up with a 24-hour project called East Quay, because we realised that we needed a more 24-hour project with self-contained flats, because a lot of people, with higher needs weren't able to access the shared environment. Because if you can understand, it's not ideal for the best of us, but if you're obviously having mental health issues, then it's not ideal. So that's why we brought that in. We do have dispersed accommodation for people experiencing mental health issues. That's done in conjunction with the local health board, and we also have floating support. On top of that, we have a specialist 3 supported housing projects for young people, and that's 24-hour, all 3 of them. And I've obviously touched upon what they do with the youngsters, but and the key thing is, because of the age of the people involved, they are staffed overnight, 24-hour, and the rest of it. We have Jigsaw family mediation, which I talked about earlier, and of course we do have a specialist drop-in service for young people, ages 16 to 24. Another of our specialist services is we have on Holton Road, the Criminal Justice Project. So 3 houses, for example, and they are geared to people who are either some who may have come out of the prison system, or some people who may have offending behaviours but haven't gone into the system yet. But if their behaviour does worsen, then they're at risk of doing so. And that support is, again, similar of nature to the other projects, but it's geared towards trying to, help people manage their behaviours, understand rights and responsibility around their housing. And of course, these projects are advantageous because you do get a housing priority by going into these services. So it's about communicating that it's in people's interests to work and engage with support, so that they meet their housing needs when they move on. We have a specialist learning difficulties floating support called the SGIN service. That's been around nearly 5 years now. That's very successful. We also have specialist support for families with support needs called the Taylor Project. So that's 6 dispersed houses across the Vale and floating support. So what I mean by families with support needs, typically the service works with families where social services has identified that a child as being on a child protection register, or a scenario where a child might be classed as a child in need. Where there's a housing issue around that family, they get referred to this service. There's 6 dispersed houses where people will go in, and they will again have a short-term tenancy there. And it's about learning to live and manage your own accommodation. And the advantage of a dispersed accommodation is you're not in a block with other people. You're not in, a shared accommodation setting like Home Street or Windsor Road, or in a set project. You are basically in a house or a flat that just looks like anything else in the community. No one would be any the wiser. It's just like anything you would be moving into. So that makes it more like a realistic setting, shall we say. And again, we're getting some very positive outcomes on that. And one of our other specialist services would be the Croesfin Substance Misuse Service. So that's 9 units of supported accommodation, split across 2 sites, one in Barry Road and one on Holton Road in Barry. And that's geared for people who are abstinent, working towards abstinence from substance misuse. So, for example, drug and alcohol issues. That isn't 24 hours supported, but we are looking at how to reconfigure that service to increase staffing there, because we've had demand, we've had calls from service users. Could we have more staff availability? So that's something we're exploring at the moment. And obviously, we do work very closely with the third sector in all these projects. So any referrals, for example, for the young people services, the referrals are made through to local college. Glamorgan volunteering services to, for job opportunities and work experience. In terms of the mental health projects, they work very closely with Mind. So people may require additional counselling, or they may require peer support from other agencies like Mind. So that's when support workers will bring those other agencies in. You also have the complex needs project that's coming out soon. And in terms of older people, the Golau Credit service works very closely with Age Connect in the Vale. So that service is for older people above age 55 normally. They do floating support in the community, but they also do drop-in service as well at various sheltered housing schemes across the Vale. But where someone is isolated and lonely, it's not our service's role to befriend someone or to occupy someone's time. It's about helping them find those connections. And so that's when they will look for volunteering opportunities for someone. They will work with Age Connect. They will, speak to Glamorgan Volunteering and other agencies, take someone to the library and find out what services are accessible there, really. There's some key facts and figures there. I don't want to bore everyone with all the numbers and details, but as you can see, it's a multi-million-pound grant that we get from Welsh Government there. And, like I said, we've got some, high rates of use. Over 1,900 people used the service in the last year. The one-stop shop has had over 3,000 inquiries. We have 91 people in supported accommodation right now. So that gives you an idea of how many people there are. But to give you an idea, I was just looking at the waiting list this morning. We've got 70 people waiting for supported accommodation, so as much as we have, there's always a big demand for it. And on to the next slide, those are some of the providers that we work with. You may be familiar with those names, but those are commissioned to us as a council, so we fund them to deliver those services. And I think I've spoken too much, really. But if obviously anyone has any questions later on, I'm happy to answer. But thank you for your time. I'll pass you on to my colleague Farida now, who'll talk about the housing management side of things. Thank you.
Hi, Farida. If you're able to press your large activation button in the bottom centre, hopefully we can hear you.
Hi, I pressed it. It's on red. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes, that means you're live, loud and clear.
Perfect. Thanks ever so much. Good evening, all. I'm going to talk you through the housing management function and how sorry, if you could move over to the next slide, please. And how we in housing work with other third sector organisations to deliver our services. But I think there needs to be a little bit of an explanation of what I mean by housing management. So housing management is delivered by Vale Homes, Housing Management and Community Investment Team. And the typical roles that you would find in this team include housing managers and their assistant, income officers that collect the rent, money advice officers that provide advice on benefits, community development and involvement officers who will engage with residents and work with them to deliver community development projects and also listen to their opinion about our services. As well as this, we also have a digital inclusion and volunteering officers that promote volunteering opportunities and help residents become digitally included. So the roles of these individuals typically involve letting properties, managing properties, dealing with antisocial behaviour, neighbourhood disputes, improving neighbourhoods, developing communities, supporting and providing advice, and developing employment and skills. And to deliver each of these, I'm going to refer to each of these in turn. So in terms of housing management, and that's all about helping our tenants to maintain their tenancies. And in order to do this, we will work with a range of agencies to get support in place. We're not specialised, we're very generic. So we might need to call on specialised agencies, so we'll refer into them. And it's very much about providing a joined up service and joining them dots, really. So typically, we might have an ASV case, so we might need to call on victim support. Somebody might be elderly in our property, and we might need to call on the Alzheimer's Society. We work very closely with tenants and residents groups to understand what it is that they need in their in their local area. We might need to liaise externally with the CAB, the police, SAFA, Safer Vale, Age Connect, and supporting people. And Headwinds just run through all of the types of services that they offer. In addition to this, we might need to liaise with other housing associations in the area. That's all related to our housing management function. If we move on to the next slide. So in terms of delivering community investment support, and this is all about working with our communities to improve neighbourhoods and green spaces, we might provide community garden volunteering opportunities, arrange for litter picks, provide support and play equipment facilitation, and also food poverty alleviation. And the screen is so small I can't actually make out, but I'll give it a try. So we will work with organisations like Flying Start. They might refer parents in to us. Organisations like Lamai. We'll work with the Beavers and the Scouts Club, organisations like the Cardiff City Foundation. We've worked with them and put on a community football programme called the Kicks Project. We work with Pedal Power, who will come out and work with communities and teach young people to ride a bike. And we'll take referrals from a range of agencies, such as the Cardiff and the Vale Action for Mental Health, Recovery Cymru. And as I say, we'll put the feelers out, working with partner organisations, and either they will refer into us or we will reach out to them to make them aware of what it is that we're currently delivering. Next slide, please. Also continuing with the community investment, we work with our tenants to improve their skills and make them more employable if that's what they want. So we can offer volunteering work placements. We refer into specialist agencies for support. We're also working with other housing associations and provide free online training through a portal called eCymru. We support residents with seeking money for grants to pay for courses, providing equipment to help residents become digitally included. So, for example, at the moment, a lot of services are going online. Some people don't necessarily have access to equipment such as iPads or phones that have got the internet. So we can provide that equipment. And also we're working with an organisation called the Good Things Foundation, which is all about providing low-cost internet to residents. And we would also work on youth employment initiatives with the Prince's Trust, Job Centre Plus. We have a range of internal departments as well, adult education and CALP Plus programme that we can refer into, as well as community adult education team. Next slide, please. Again, community development, continuing with that, we want to work with our communities, for our communities, and increase capacity and promote well-being of residents, and as well as promoting intergenerational work. And one of the ways in which we're currently working with our communities is in terms of promoting their health and well-being. We've signed up over 41 organisations that include charities to support our Value in the Vale scheme. And what the Value in the Vale scheme is, it's a scheme where anybody that's interested in reducing social isolation, developing new skills, can come in and volunteer in a number of organisations, and they will be rewarded for their time. And how they will be rewarded is if they offer 1 hour of their time, they can get one reward. That reward, if they say, for example, collect 5 rewards, they could go for a free coffee in a local cafe. On the screen there, you've got a number of organisations that have signed up to this scheme. And as I say, there's 41 organisations, some of which are businesses and others are voluntary sector organisations. And it's worth visiting the Value in the Vale website to understand who them organisations are. And some volunteers, they want to volunteer, they enjoy the people contact that they have, but they don't actually want to take their rewards, and what they can do is gift it forward. So we had a campaign where a number of residents that had volunteered actually donated their credits to a women's refuge, and these ladies were able to take advantage of free coffees and free meals from organisations that had been signed up. We work very closely with Digital Communities Wales to promote digital inclusion, organisations like 50 Plus Forum, tenants and residents groups as well. Next slide, please. I think that was it. That just gives you a flavour of the typical organisations that we work with. Housing management and community investment is very broad, and we can't do this alone. So we reach out to work with third sector organisations, and happy to take any questions from you in relation to that.
Thank you very much both for those comprehensive presentations. Any questions or comments from anyone, please? So a question from me, if I may. I'm not sure who wants to pick it up, but particularly following on from the earlier agenda item we had, I'd be really interested to hear your perception around, in terms of the relationship, the working relationship between a clearly significant amount of work happening between housing and the third sector. What do you see as being the current pressures at the moment, and what opportunities do you think there are for us to strengthen engagement to ensure that residents get the support that they need? I don't know who wants to pick that one up.
I'm happy to come in, Councillor Lysell, if needed. In terms of challenges, resources obviously a huge challenge. I don't think anyone's surprised by that. In terms of a lot of our service users, when our providers are unable to support someone, or they require support that's beyond or outside the scope of our services, getting waiting lists, can be weeks for appointments for things like CAB or other agencies. That's a challenge. Building relationships is key as well. I think what tends to happen is when agencies work together or collaborate, the relationships are built with people, not necessarily the organisation or the agency itself. People, of course, move on and change roles, and then you can spend a lot of time building up a really good rapport with that organisation, and then suddenly that person's gone, and then you're back to square one, and that the wealth of knowledge that's been built up in exchange then suddenly disappears. So that's another challenge. But in terms of opportunities, there's always more scope for collaboration. I know, for example, the one-stop shop on Holton Road, there's a shared space downstairs in the basement there. I don't know if anyone's been to the project there. It's delivered by Pobble, but upstairs you've got the sort of advice centre where the support staff are based, and in the basement down the bottom there is like a whole training room. It's all set up with it's a good facility down there. It's a good opportunity to have citizen advice, or down there, or the volunteering service, or money advice, or any other agencies that could offer a service that would be beneficial. Could be down there maybe one day a week, or hold sessions. Just to have build those links. But also, people don't necessarily want to travel from one place to another. all over the, especially when, money's tight and travel, it can be expensive. But to have more people, more agencies based in joint locations, I think that might make it more, well, easier and more attractive for collaborating, but also just accessibility for our service users. Just a couple of thoughts from myself. But
yeah, thank you, Heather. So really interesting to hear from many colleagues in the third sector about where there are those opportunities for engagement across the third sector, for example, where there is capacity and resources that could be shared, how well that's understood across the sector, and whether there's anything more that we or others could be doing to facilitate that. But Nick, I can see that you wanted to come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And just to sort of add to Heather's point, really, you made the point regarding finances, and money is always a barrier, of course. But regarding some of the barriers, I think it's probably about capacity and confidence. And I'm thinking specifically of some of the community groups that we work with. They're very young in terms of their existence, often rely on a few volunteers to take the lead, and the most successful groups that we work with are where people are really passionate and dedicated and want to make a difference. So a reliance on those people is great, but it's also a risk. So I suppose turning that into the opportunity, I suppose, is just the untapped potential that's out there. Absolutely massive, really, both in terms of individuals and in terms of groups. To give one example, we work with volunteers in Penarth around the food pod at the moment, and people were initially reluctant to get involved, didn't think that they could contribute a great deal, perhaps didn't think that they had the skills and the confidence to take that on. But they're finding within a short period of time that they absolutely have, and they're growing in confidence and wanting to do more and wanting to expand and wanting to get bigger and do more things. And I think that is one example, but roll that out to other community groups and other organisations and other individuals in the Vale, and it's absolutely massive. It's just, how do we get people in, and how do we support them and build and empower them to really make a difference, really. So I think that's a biggie for me.
Thank you, Nick. Really interesting to hear that example. And I know in this committee previously, we've had some discussion about peer-to-peer mentoring, and how that incredibly valuable experience, which is there within community groups and within the third sector, can be captured and shared. So really interesting to hear your perspective on that. Farida, did you want to come in? Thank you.
Yes, certainly. I think in terms of pressures, we have a mental health crisis, if I could put it like that. We're seeing a number of residents kind of bury their head in the sand, if you like. And I think we as trusted intermediaries have had a foot in the door. However, we're also rent collectors. And so whilst they might trust us on occasion, they also know that we're going to be collecting the rent as well. So actually working with third parties and third sector organisations that are completely independent of us, I feel it is worth exploring on potential wellbeing projects. And I think there is an appetite for collaboration. There's lots of external funding available. Nick's just mentioned the food pod, and we're collaborating and putting a joint funding bid in relation to that. And that's the kind of things I'd be really keen on exploring with third sector organisations. If they've got an idea that they want to explore and they want to get their foot in the door to some of our tenants and access them, certainly be interested in speaking to them.
Thanks, Farida. So in relation to that offer and that opportunity, how do third sector organisations know about that? How will they find out that opportunity is there for them? Is that something we're working on with GVS? Is that something that we're being proactive about? I'm considering the point that Sarah made earlier on in terms of her presentation, that we may often be seen to be not particularly proactive, and it sounds as if here's a great opportunity for us to say, come and work with us.
Yes, certainly. So that specific project that I mentioned in relation to food poverty, we've certainly reached out to some of the other food projects and said, look, we're looking to submit this bid. Would you like to collaborate with us? So we're already engaging with the third sector organisations operating in this arena. So I think one of the points that Sarah mentioned is that when she was doing the consultation work and I had a session with her, it's really interesting that she mentioned that, you know, them relationships are there with individuals, but not necessarily departments. And I think that's where we need to focus on, because there'll be certain individuals in teams that are able to make that connection and reach out. But I think corporately, we do need to raise the profile of working with the third sector, and how we might be able to engage on different projects, because it's sometimes thinking out of the box. And if we are on this transformation agenda, and if we are looking at different ways of delivering service, we need to create that space from within to start thinking differently. And I think that's probably missing.
Thanks, Farida. I don't know, Tom, if Tom Baring is still on the call, but if you are, Tom, it would be interesting to hear whether or not you think some of that will be picked up through the refreshed compact that's being drafted even as we speak. Yeah, you're still with us. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for bringing me back in, because I think that's exactly the kind of opportunity to make the compact feel really real, and to give some real tangible examples, and it links for me as well, Chair, back to the role and importance of this committee and keeping this on the agenda to make sure that people continue to see what those opportunities are. And I'm reflecting on the point that Farida made as well about it's about developing departmental relationships with different parts of the sector as well. And I think there's a piece of work that perhaps Helen and I can pick up on, that once we've got that compact and some of the other work is completed, it's really how do we make sure that that's disseminated across the organisation and becomes a part of how all of us work, rather than, as colleagues have said, just individuals.
Thank you, Tom. Really helpful to get that perspective. I can see Conway, you'd like to come in. Conway Hawkins, thank you.
Hi. So I was just going to ask, I'm from Wick, so a rural village, small number of homes. There are very small number of Vale homes, because the majority were sold off some years ago. I was interested to hear what Teresa said about the food project, but so for us, it's whether there's any joint working with other housing providers. We've set up a small food hub in Wick, which runs once a fortnight, and it's delivering well, but to a very small number of people who would live in Vale homes, and a larger number who would live in United Welsh. And we're about to have a third social housing provider come into the village. Is there any sort of joined up thinking with housing providers to look at how in rural areas where the numbers are low, people can join together and deliver a better service? Thanks.
Really important point. Thank you so much. And Nick, yeah, do you want to come in on that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Conor, for making that point. In terms of the relationship with housing associations in the Vale, it is strong. There is a partnership agreement in place which sort of sets out how we work together on a strategic level, and meet regularly and work together jointly on projects. A lot of it is about the construction of new homes and about sort of allocations and other things. And I can recall in the past, not that long ago, there were specific groups, themed groups, would meet looking at particular issues, including community investment. And I think there's been sort of joint work around employability, etc. I know there's work at the moment out in Llantwit Major regarding the food project there, with broad representation from lots of different groups and lots of different organisations. So, I don't think there's anything specific. Well, there isn't anything specific at the moment in Wick, But, you know, if there's something that's going on that's working on the ground, which it sounds like there is, and opportunities and ideas about engaging with the United Welsh or other landlords, then, you know, we're certainly happy to have a conversation with Conway and with the group outside of this meeting, really to take that forward. But yeah, clearly we've still got council homes in Wick. So, you know, whatever we can do to make a difference in those areas and ensuring the focus isn't always on sort of the bigger conurbations, really, where we've got the majority of tenants.
Chair, are you able to come back?
Yeah, apologies. Yeah, so thank you for that clarification, Nick. So it sounds, Conway, as if there's an invitation there for you to have a follow-up conversation with officers about the work that's specifically being done in Wick. But also, I'll assume that the Refresh Compact that we're putting in place will be reflective of all the communities across the Vale, including our rural communities. And again, Tom, if you want to just jump in and respond to that, that would be really helpful. And then I'll move us on to the final agenda item.
Yes, certainly, Chair. And the compact absolutely will be county-wide. And whilst it's between ourselves and GVS, clearly GVS have got really good coverage right across the Vale, from there have been the west of the Vale in Llantryd Major right across to Penarth. So absolutely, and one of the things that we've been discussing, and I was talking with GVS members at their AGM about, is how do we make sure that we're regularly communicating with all of those members via GVS so that they're aware of the breadth of opportunities. So definitely a focus for the compact.
Great, thank you. So the opportunity is there to engage with us, to have those conversations. If colleagues think there are gaps, things that they want to talk to us about, our door is open and our ears are open. And we very much value the relationship that we have with the community and with the third sector, and are wanting to strengthen that going forward so that we can ensure that people living in the Vale benefit from that broad creative partnership. So thank you all for your time and your engagement tonight. Again, you're welcome to stay for the final committee agenda item, but if you want to leave us and enjoy the rest of your evening, please feel free to do that. So we move on to the final agenda item tonight. This is agenda item 6, which is a report on the Let's Talk About Life in the Vale, a survey report. This is a reference from Cabinet, and it's before us tonight for committee's consideration, with any views or recommendations being fed back to Cabinet. For those who are less familiar with the survey, it helps us, the survey findings help us better understand the opinions of residents in the Vale of Glamorgan and will help inform the preparation of the corporate plan. And I can see that Rob Jones, Operations Manager, is here to take us through it. So thank you for joining us tonight, Rob, and over to you.
No problem at all. Thank you, Chair. I have got some slides to share tonight, and Karen, after having seen that it looked a bit tricky when Nick tried to do it, I will take you up on your offer to share them for me.
You're welcome. And just to point out, the Chair did mention about the reference to follow from Cabinet. Obviously, the minutes of Cabinet have not been completed yet. Cabinet sat last Thursday, but I can reassure everyone that the reference was agreed, and the actual recommendation in the report is the same as came out of Cabinet last week. So we are confident to carry on and consider and then report any comments back to Cabinet. So yes, I will share for you now. Rob, thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Karen. And I'll try and do a bit of a COVID flashback and say slide when we want to move slides, if that's all right. Yeah, so I'm here to present the reference from Cabinet. some of the headline findings of the survey that I'll run through, and I've also pulled out some results that I think might be of particular interest to this committee. What I've got tonight really just is a snapshot of the data. It was a really detailed piece of work. There's more detail in the cabinet report that committee members will obviously have seen, and more again in the sort of full independent report that Data Cymru have produced for us that's available as an appendix to that cabinet report. So thank you, Karen. So yeah, as Councillor Lloyd-Selby said at the start, let's talk about Life in the Vale. It was a survey exercise run by the council in partnership with Data Cymru to help understand residents' experiences of life in the Vale and identify their priorities to help inform future service delivery. It was designed, I suppose, to be more than just a traditional satisfaction survey. We were seeking to understand how, I suppose, public services and in particular council services influence citizens' experience of living in the Vale of Glamorgan. It's a bilingual survey. It was conducted online, hosted for us by Data Cymru using their survey package. It was open for responses from the 22nd of August through to December 2023. In total, there were 4,009 responses to the survey. One of the reasons that we partnered with Data Cymru was sort of for their statistical expertise to support us in this. And the point that I'd want to make at the start is they consider the sample that we've got to be very robust. The overall margin for error for the exercise is 1.6%, which is considered to be very good in statistical terms. So we can place real confidence in the results that we're getting here. So the survey covered a wide range of topics. These were separated into 11 sections. These included public service priorities, cost of living, climate change, volunteering, and transport, or travel and transport. Some of the questions were developed specifically for this survey. They were bespoke questions that Data Cymru helped us put together. Others were taken from other national survey exercises. For example, there's the National Survey for Wales that is run in partnership with WLGA that people might be familiar with. There was also, for example, a national piece of work that had been done by NRW where we lifted some of the questions out of that. The theory behind that being that where there was strong national level data, we wanted to try and gather the Vale equivalent to see whether there was a difference in, I suppose, a regional or a Vale level perspective on something with the national average. So you can see on the slide there that the areas that it covered and the total number of responses. And Karen, if you wouldn't mind moving us on to the next one, I'll start with the headline results. So the results show that people are generally happy with the Vale as a place to live. And we've got 60% of respondents saying that they're either very or fairly satisfied with the Vale as a place to live, and 80% saying they would recommend it as a place to live. The results also show that the council's priorities are broadly in line with those of residents. So, for example, we've got 78% of residents telling us that they're either very or fairly concerned with the cost of living crisis, 68% telling us they're either very or fairly concerned with the climate emergency, and 65% with the nature emergency. We've also got 73% of respondents saying they're very or fairly concerned with services and support for older people, and 61% answering the same way around services and support for young people. And all of those are, as we know, areas of priority for the council, as reflected in the latest annual delivery plan and the budget strategy that was put into place earlier this year. We also see, and you can see the full list of kind of service priority on the slide there, but we've got being able to easily access care and healthcare services, living in a neighbourhood that is clean and tidy, and being able to buy or rent a good quality home coming through clearly as respondents' top priorities. And again, that's in line with the policy agenda for the organisation. It's worth saying that with that list of priorities, there are some fairly significant variations when you start to look at the profile of respondents by age. So while those, I suppose, top priorities are pretty consistent across our group, or across all groups, there is a real variation where if you look, I suppose, simply that the younger the group of respondents that you look at, the higher up the list education and access to good quality schools becomes, and that question about the ability to afford a good quality home increases in the priority that it's being given by respondents. And in line with those changes, you see the access to care and healthcare sort of drop down slightly. But it is broadly consistent across all age groups. So again, as I said, there's a fair degree of confidence that we've got a clear steer from residents there. And it is broadly in line with what we're seeking to do as an organisation. If you could take us on to the next slide now, please, Karen. There are, however, some results in it that show there's much more work to be done for us as an organisation. I think in particular in explaining our work and engaging our residents in decision making. You can see some of the measures on the slide there. To run through them, the results are stark in places. We can see more residents stating that they either strongly or slightly disagreed than agree with statements that services provided by the council are of a high quality, that the council acts in the interests of local residents, that the council takes residents' views into account when making decisions, and that the services provided by the council represent good value for money. I think we can understand some of the factors that are driving those perceptions, but they are residents' perceptions nonetheless. It's an area of our work that's going to become an immediate focus following the additional recommendation that was tabled at Cabinet, and I'll return to that at the end of the report. Thank you, Karen. Yeah, and on the next slide, we can see now, I suppose, the results that I lifted out that I thought may have been particular interest to this committee. Most of these are taken from the section in the survey on volunteering. You can see in that sort of top left chart that just over half of respondents answered that they were either currently involved in some sort of volunteering or would like to be. Respondents were given a prompt for that question that explained volunteering as including informal volunteering, such as helping friends or neighbours with shopping, etc. So it is volunteering in its broadest sense, but I think it still demonstrates that there's a significant appetite for citizens to get more involved in their community. And I think probably that 17.3% figure of people who are not currently involved in volunteering but would like to be might be of particular interest. And when we drill down into the figures behind that chart, again, we can see some really interesting variations by age. But what is significant is the combined number of respondents responding, that they're either currently volunteering or interested in volunteering remains roughly the same. So for example, to try and explain that, if we isolate under 34s, what we see is those first two figures drop to 22 and 25%. So while what we've got is that number of people who are saying they're currently involved in volunteering is dropping down, but actually that's almost being made up for by roughly the same proportion of people saying they would like to be involved. So it is a really interesting finding that across all age groups, we've got in the region of 50% of people telling us they want to be involved in their community. If you look then at the chart that's below that, that picks out the impact that people say volunteering has had on them. So it isolates the people who said they are currently volunteering and asks for the impact that it's had on a series of things. And what we can see is the majority of people saying volunteering has had a positive impact on their skills, their confidence, and their medical and mental and physical well-being. Again, a real positive in terms of what volunteering can do for individuals, and probably of interest to people at committee tonight. In the top right-hand chart, this isn't from a volunteering section, it's from another part of the survey. But what we can see from the figures there is that people generally feel quite positively and have a connection to their local area. We've got good majorities of respondents agreeing that they feel part of their local area and they feel that people in their local area get along. like to think people on the call would agree it's a fair reflection of how we would expect people to feel about their communities. It's also contrary to probably a lot of discourse that we might see online from people about the Vale and people that live in their local area. So I think it's quite a useful sense check, I suppose, to where a lot of people who live in the Vale actually are. And that pie chart in the bottom right-hand corner, again, I think maybe poses an interesting question, if nothing else, which is you can see that we've got 35.5%, only 35.5% of respondents feeling that their local area has all of the services and facilities that it needs. I should stress that that question is broader than just council services. It's asking whether communities have everything that they need in a broader sense, but the result does suggest that there are gaps in provisions at lots of levels in the Vale, and I suppose space for organisations operating in the Vale to move into. So yeah, hopefully some interesting findings for committee there. Karen, if you could move us on to the next one, thank you. And finally, I suppose I've just tried to pick out what happens next, where we go next with this piece of work. So we're now in the process of formally reporting the results of the survey. The report was considered by Cabinet and presented at the PSB last week. There's another meeting happening tonight where our elected member champions are meeting to consider the results and look at them in a little bit more detail. The same report that this committee is considering tonight will go to Corporate Performance and Resources in May. So we're reporting it as widely as we can through, I suppose, those kind of formal decision-making structures. We're also in the process of undertaking some follow-up engagement to try and understand the results a little bit more. As I said at the start, the data that underpins this report is very robust. It is the most robust data I think we've probably ever had in the council on public perception. But the methodology does mean that there are some groups who will have been underrepresented in that sample. And so now we're running some follow-up sessions with those. For example, we've been doing some groups with adults with moderate to severe disabilities and their carers to try and understand actually does the experience of that group of individuals tally with that kind of broader view we've got of the population, and where there are kind of clear themes coming through in the results, and we're following up to try and gain a bit of a better understanding of those. Something that you'll see if you read through the report is, as well as what we're learning in the cost of living section, actually the impact of the cost of living crisis is something that is a clear theme across lots of other sections, and particularly if you look into some of the open comments that are being made during the survey. So we're arranging some sessions with food bank users and at the food projects in Lantwit and St Athan to try and speak to individuals there, or already where the people who manage those services are going to speak to individuals on our behalf, just to try and tease out a little bit more about what is the reality of the impact of that on citizens. And there is, as I mentioned before, I suppose a clear need for some immediate action in some areas to respond to this, and it's public participation that I suppose I'm talking about here. This is something that's been established as a priority for the council for the last 2 years. And in our latest annual delivery plan, we identify the need to continue to deliver our public participation strategy and include the use of placemaking in how we involve and communicate with people and ensure citizens have the opportunity to have their voices heard. I think that when you read the report, the results really bring into focus how important that work is. And I think it was with that mind that at Cabinet, Councillor Sivanyanam added a recommendation to review and reprioritise the work in the public participation strategy in response to what the results are telling us. That work has already begun. I was meeting with colleagues about that earlier today, and will be reported back to Cabinet now before the summer recess. And of course, we're also in the process of feeding back all of these results to everyone who participated in the exercise and doing some broader comms work to publicise them within the Vale. So thank you very much for listening to that and for your time this evening in considering the report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rob. for taking us through that. Really interesting, as you say, a bit of a mixed bag in terms of survey findings, which in some ways is not surprising. Good to hear that the issue around public participation and engagement with the public is being prioritised. So that's really good to hear. Any questions or comments from anyone for Rob, please? Conway, thank you.
Sorry, I started reading it just today, I'm afraid, and I was surprised by the amount of information there and how. I mean, are there going to be an opportunity to feedback at some later stage, because there's a lot of information in that report and can't be assimilated really in too quickly. Otherwise, it'll be wasted, won't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose we welcome any thoughts and feedback that committee members have. Because if you want to channel them back directly to me or through Tom Bowring, I think that would be an option. I'd be more than happy to come to a future meeting of this committee if that's the way that the chair would like to approach it. Yeah, we don't know quite how to phrase it without implying that we don't normally, but we genuinely do want to get as much feedback as we can on this. I think one of the clear conclusions that you can draw from reading the report, and certainly that I've drawn from reading it, is while we've made a lot of progress in recent years in how we communicate our work and how we engage citizens in decision making, there is a lot more ground that we've got to cover. And I think probably most people recognise that we're trying to do that in an increasingly sort of fractious environment. For me, that means that the key thing for us is being able to get closer to some of those community groups that we know are really active in the Vale, that we know do a great job of advocating on behalf of either their local communities or a group of individuals that they represent. And I wonder whether perhaps through the membership of this committee, and by extension some of the groups that members will be working with, we can continue to build those links. That would be something that I'd be really interested to hear anyone's thoughts on.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. So again, an open invitation to committee members and others who joined us tonight or who watch this on catch up to engage with us on this issue, because this is something that clearly the council is very committed, as we've said all through tonight's meeting, to strengthening that engagement with communities and hearing from them. And I think your offer, Rob, to come back and talk to committee at an appropriate point in the future where we can have some follow-up information in terms of progress and what that engagement looks like. And I suppose whether or not that engagement has changed anything in terms of our understanding of what matters to residents. I note that far more women than men, for example, responded to the survey, and you've already indicated that there are some groups where there's a recognition that more work needs to be done to ensure that we're capturing their views so that we're really understanding what matters to everybody living in the Vale. So I think receiving more information at some point in the future about that engagement and the steps that the council is taking to strengthen opportunities for participation would be really welcome. And I think also, that invitation is there to committee members, to the third sector, to pick up, isn't it? To make sure that the work that's being done is publicised, and if there's anything that they can do to support that engagement, then I'm sure that would be very welcome.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Chair. And just to reiterate that point, and I wonder whether it's not the same issue, but it's aligned with what Sarah was presenting earlier. It is probably a lot of those community groups that are out there, those individual advocates who we know exist in the Vale, those community coordinators who do so much. those are the people whose intelligence now I think we really need to understand a little bit the story behind the data. So yeah, I appreciate, I'm probably just repeating what you just said, but yeah, that sort of open call, I suppose, for anyone who thinks they can feed into this to get in touch. Yeah, I can't stress that enough.
Great. Thank you, Rob. So last chance from anyone. Any final questions or comments?
Chair, I was just going to mention that obviously the next meeting is a few months away. So if you wouldn't mind, I will try and get the minutes done as soon as I can and get them out to the third sector and GVS so that they can actually look at this survey and report back sooner rather than later. And obviously, Rob has already mentioned that anybody wishing to drop himself or Tom a line can do so in the meantime as well. And then hopefully by the time Corporate Resources has considered the item, we will be able to send some feedback back to Cabinet through the officers.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. That's really helpful. Just a final question from me, Rob, and that's, are we repeating the survey? And if so, when are we anticipating that we're doing that?
Yeah, so it will be repeated. Actually, this was, I mentioned we did this in partnership with Data Cymru. It was a bit of a pilot exercise for a methodology that they developed through their work with us. It is now going to become a bit of a model for all local authorities in Wales to use. So a piece of work that's now being led by the WLGA. This will become a national residence survey. We would have the opportunity to run it again this year in 24-25 if we wanted to, or in 25-26. We haven't taken a decision yet on which of those is most appropriate. I think being realistic to talk about doing it again the other side of the summer might be a little bit premature, because some of the work that's required to address what's coming through in the survey won't yet have taken effect. But yeah, we absolutely will be doing this again. And hopefully by the time we run our follow-up, as well as having then 2 data sets for the Vale of Glamorgan, we'll be able to do some benchmarking nationally as well to look at how our figures compare to other local authorities individually and how they compare to the national picture overall.
Excellent. So we look forward to receiving a follow-up report on progress, on engagement with those groups that perhaps not have engaged with the survey in the way that we would have hoped at this stage. And we also look forward to hearing what steps are going to be taken to run the survey again in the future. And really good to hear that the work that's being done, Rob, is actually quite groundbreaking and will hopefully be helpful across the rest of Wales. So always good to hear that the Vale is taking a lead in these issues. So thank you to you and your team and all those who've worked so hard to bring the report to us this evening.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So there are then no specific recommendations from committee in relation to the report. So I move that we note the report. And can I have a seconder on that, please? Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Norman. I can see your hand as well, Councillor Wood. Did you want to come in, Councillor Wood, or were you simply seconded? Yeah, okay. See your hand's gone down. Thank you. So that concludes our business for this evening. Just remains for me to thank you all for your attendance and remind everyone that our next meeting is, I believe, Monday, the 24th of June at 6 o'clock. Thank you all, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.